All right. Welcome, folks. Also, happy belated Aromantic Visibility Day, which was yesterday.
Hell yeah.
I'd forgotten about it until the evening, so apologies for the late post last night, but it was Aromantic Visibility Day. Aerospec Visibility Day is in August, but I think Aromantic Visibility Day may have come first. It
What day is
depends.
it specific?
Sorry, August
What
25th,
day
I
is it
think.
specific? 25th. I'm gonna put that on my calendar.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Some days earlier than others. Today, I actually, so I'm technically on paper only working on it part time at the moment. But usually I try to put in, a good chunk of time in the day. Lately, since coming back from the conference, I will admit I haven't been as focused this week, so not a whole lot of work has gotten done. The last couple days I was actually proctoring exams, so Thursday I felt absolutely exhausted afterwards, and so not much work was done yesterday. Today I came back
Oh, that's so
from
real.
today I came back from the exam proctoring, sat down, and was like, all right, let's grind out a Python script to. Was telling Caber that I found in the literature that the air temperature data I use from US mountains has a known issue where when they changed the temperature sensors in the early 2000s because of the experimental relationship between the battery voltage, which is influenced by temperature, the sensor, and temperature, there was an artificial change in the temperature record that resulted purely from the change in sensor being used. And so they came up with this really horrible 10-term polynomial regression that I had to implement into a Python script and then loop through and change all the air temperatures to the corrected form. So that's what I was doing this afternoon before jumping on the podcast. So I got that done about 45 minutes ago, and then I was like, all right, time to get ready for the podcast. So the podcast.
So real.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was like going through the questions and like obviously free-forming some, but like some of them I'm like, I want at least a loose idea of what I'm gonna say. So I was like writing stuff right up until the start.
Real. It'd be like that. So, as folks know, the podcast looks at asexuality and aromanticism with a real focus on highlighting just how diverse the lived experiences under those two umbrellas are. And in doing so, I'm really interested in exploring aspects of intersecting identities and how those, influence one's lived experience as an asexual or aromantic individual. So my name Tai Iwai, PhD student by day, non-binary Aro A spec content creator by night. Obviously, the host of the podcast.
Like a superhero.
Thank you. And today we're chatting with Caber, which I've really been looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Duke. And let's give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Caber. They them pronouns. I'm transmask. I'm a digital artist. I'm a variety gaming streamer. But I'm also asexual. I'm aromantic. I also have autism and ADHD. I have other things, but they're less relevant in my in my humble onion. But yeah, I stream here on Twitch, and I like playing story games, and I like picking stories apart, and sometimes I do horror. And I made my little model that you see. I have other versions of it. I think last time I was on this, I was my little Muppet form. Maybe I was my more serious form, but I don't remember. But I was lucky enough I was able to do a previous episode of this with Ty, and now I'm back to talk more about being Aro Ace.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember. I think you were the Muppet for the third episode. So yeah, I vaguely recall you being the Muppet form for the last time you were on the podcast. So today we're going to
Now
be
we're more
chatting about
serious.
Arrow Ace Pride.
Hmm. Happy Pride Month to
Yeah,
all y'all.
absolutely. Happy Pride. Lots and lots of things to talk about around that for sure. And I know you've talked about it in the past if you go back to like episode 3, but just to, remind folks, you know, how easy was it to come to realize your Arrow Ace spec identity?
So for me, I feel like it was really, I don't know, watch like go back to the third episode, go to this one, watch me say different shit. But for me, reflecting on it now at the point in my life that I am now, it feels like it was like, really difficult. I didn't realize that I was Arrow Ace until like my mid 20s, and I was in the middle of a long-term relationship. Um, and coming to that realization was very painful for me and for my partner, to kind of realize we didn't feel the same about each other. Um, and like, I still cared a lot about them. I enjoyed our relationship. I pursued it genuinely. Um, but I also think that like attraction at its core is like this, it can kind of smooth over little incompatibilities that people have, if there's if you have different sleep styles that aren't really compatible, or like if you are maybe a little bit inconsiderate in certain ways of living with each other. Um, Being attracted to someone can definitely smooth those things over. But if you don't have that, it really has to be more of a perfect lineup of like desires and living styles. Um, and for a really long time, I thought I was pansexual, proudly pansexual. Uh, and that's just because, like, to me, my rationale for it was that I didn't feel any different towards people regarding their genders. But like when people, I would always get like, not like uppity about it, but like some people would be like, I'm pansexual and I don't care what the gender of the person I'm in love with is. And I used to say to myself, like, no, that's not right. It's not that I don't care. I'm not indifferent. I love all genders and I think they're all great and attractive. But really, I was also very neutral about anyone, regardless of their gender. Um, and I was a very big fan of romance fiction. Um, like I was a big fan of like manga, and I read a lot of like shoujo romance. That was like the anime that I consumed. The books that I read, it was in a lot of the things I consumed. I was very, very into it, and so it didn't really even occur to me that I wouldn't want that for myself, as well as like physical touch is my favorite love language. So I really like affection. I really like intimacy. Um, but it's that the difficulty of me figuring it out was like the complexities of how like, especially when I was younger, I was very, very desperate for attention. And also wanting to be someone's first choice or someone's favorite. Because in like relationship structures, it's very often like you have your friends, but your partner is always going to be the top of the hierarchy. You're always going to choose your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend over friendships you've had for 13, 20 years. And that like ingrained hierarchy of like, I wanted to be someone's first choice. Um, and also just having absolutely no experience, because I was a very shy shut-in. Um, so my only experience with relationships was through writing and fiction, comics, which does not give you the best understanding of things.
Absolutely. And I know that for me, I certainly was desperate to want to be able to fit in because all throughout my life, being a fellow ADHDer, I really struggled, making connections, fitting in at school. And so it was just like desperate for just, even the smallest amount of attention. Uh,
Mhm.
Much like you, I didn't realize until much later in life, what, my Aero A spec identity was. And it kind of came to me retrospectively after, trying to be in a long distance relationship in, 2019, 2020, realizing, wait a minute, what my idea of this relationship and what I thought was, you know, romantic and, sexual attraction was actually something perhaps very different. And I very much still identify, under the gray umbrella of sexuality, but in terms of romance, I don't believe there was actually any real romantic attraction in that relationship. And I think what it was some sort of emotional closeness that was drawing me in. But I always found the romantic aspects of it very awkward and difficult and felt like I was just robotically performing it because I had to. And it wasn't until looking back at this retrospectively, I was like, wait a minute. I think I might be Arrow.
Yeah, it's tricky, especially because the idea of being in a relationship is like you want to make the other person happy, or like a lot of people when they talk about relationships are like, you need to compromise, it's about compromise. Or like people who say that love is a choice and it's one of the hardest choices you ever have to make. And it's like, it's not. I don't actually think it is. I don't think you choose to be attracted or be in love with someone. You can choose to stay with someone if there's some friction you need to learn how to communicate. Sure, there's difficulties, but I don't think love is a difficult choice. And if it is, I don't think you might actually be attracted to the person that you're with, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, but it can be really difficult to kind of come to that conclusion though, and in many ways, because we're so
Oh, it's super
ingrained.
hard.
Yeah, because we're told from the time we're like 4 or 5, you're gonna grow up, you're gonna have a relationship, you're gonna get married, you're gonna do all the things that your parents told you to do, that you were told in school was gonna happen, and then folks that like us are like, but what if we don't? But what if that's not us?
Well, it's also like it is ingrained from like I've seen people where it's like two newborns are placed like side by side on a couch. And then one of the kids like rolls over or like just wobbles their hand or their hands are just happen to be touching because they're next to each other. And then the parents will coo and be like, oh, they're in love. Oh, they're going to be dating one day. They're going to get married. And like this grandiose fan fiction that just unspools about these two like infants that are literally just side by side, don't have a concept of what romance or intimacy is. They don't even know where they are. They're just kind of lumps. And yet it is like from the moment they pop out. Even before that, some people
Did we lose you? I think we might have lost you. Yeah, there we go. Welcome back, Caber. Sorry
I
about
sorry
that.
about that. So sorry. Yeah, just I could hear you for a bit and then I could hear you asking me like yeah, did you cut out? Can I not hear you? Uh and then everything just blipped for a second. So sorry
Oops.
about that.
No worries. I'm glad we got it sorted.
Hmm. I don't know where I cut out, but I was basically just yapping on that from like even people like before they pop out a kid, they can be like, like rubbing their baby bump, being like, oh, I can't wait for my daughter's wedding. I can't wait for my son to have kids. Like from before they're even born, this expectation and ideal is put on them of having a relationship or having intimacy that is just it permeates like every part of your life.
And of course, we're assuming they're going to be heterosexual and they're going to be allosexual.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and like I know some of the disappointment that some parents get from being queer is because they've envisioned the entirety of their children's lives before the children have even lived them. They've pictured what their daughter's going to look like on their wedding day, and it's like this crushing disappointment that they don't get to live vicariously through their kids. Um, when it doesn't end up being like when they don't end up getting married, or maybe they go to a courthouse wedding as opposed to a big ceremony, and it's just there's just expectations from the go.
yeah, both a metanormative take as well as a allonormative take. Absolutely. But don't, I can totally appreciate, I know that my mom was, disappointed to find out that she probably won't be getting grandkids from me. But I think they've, my folks have slowly come to grips with that sort of disappointment. Trying to get them to learn my pronouns has been a different story, though. But that one's only been, only kind of sprung them on that in December. So that's a much more recent thing to for them to have to take in, and they've had a really
Yeah.
tough time knowing me as my the pronouns I was assigned at birth for 37 years, and now they're like, "You're not?" I'm like, "Nope." And I think they're really struggling because of that. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's
Same
not.
with
Uh,
like my parents. I think I mean I don't know, but I think they could understand if I was binary, but something about the non-binariness, like the they them pronouns, is definitely like my parents are putting in the effort, which props to them, but it's definitely more of a struggle to them than if I had just straight up said, and not just them, most people, especially because like I mean I'm very lucky. Testosterone gave me a beard, but unfortunately, what that means is that people he him me all the time, which is not the most incorrect. It's sometimes it's nice and it's validating. It's like, "Oh, I'm masculine. Thank you." Um, but it's not the one I mainly use. So it's sort of like an interesting like that people could get the binary version, but the they them, it's either like clumsily people don't use it, or I've had people where if you don't present like so if I have a friend who's like more binary, um and it's and is like sworn off of using they them pronouns because people would people who had known him for like 4 years um would use they them for him because I guess in their brain he didn't present masculinely enough for them to lock in a he him pronoun.
that's rather unfortunate.
Hmm.
Ugh, I'm sorry for your friend, but it's really frustrating. Obviously, in my case, it's pretty obvious what society reads me as. There's not too many contextual clues. I mean, I've been trying to grow out my hair, but beyond that, there's not many changes I guess I've made. I've started wearing slightly femme clothing here and there, but not really. It's mostly just t-shirts like this. So it's very obvious as to why people don't read me as anything but. It is frustrating though.
It's super frustrating because like you shouldn't have to change. Like if you want to, yeehaw, rock on. I love that. But I don't feel like you should have to be more feminine or have to grow out your hair. Like you should be able to exist the way you want to exist, and people should just either not assume or if they do assume, you correct them, and then they change that in their brain forever. Kind of like how if someone says your name wrong, then you're like, oh, this is actually my name, and they're like, oh shit, and then they call you the right name.
Hmm.
Um, it should sort of be more of like a, oh hey, yeah, don't assume that I'm a dude, or don't assume that I'm a lady. Uh, I would prefer neutrality, and they're like, okay, cool. In the vault, that's what it'll be forever. But they don't.
No, I've had some folks that are great, and obviously, many folks in the queer community, it's like, all right, they them, and that's easy. But outside of that, in many academic spaces, it's been rather tough. Obviously, with my friends, when I go to the Tim's down the street, it's always sir, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
ugh. But I
Like, please
have
don't perceive
noticed,
me at all.
yeah, exactly. I've noticed that I think because of all of this, looking at my clothes and looking at anything that looks mask has been giving me dysphoria. And it's
Mm.
gotten worse because I think of the
Oh,
because of the association, obviously, that it's created. It's like if I wear these clothes, they'll assume I'm mask and therefore dysphoria.
yeah. Or- Whereas before you didn't have to think about it, or sometimes it's sort of like, once the egg is cracked or once the door is open,
Hmm.
right? You can't go back in it.
No,
And so it's similar to me where right before I realized, not that this is relevant to being Arrow Ace, but
no.
right before I realized that I was trans, um, I I hyperfemmed really, really hard. And I tried like makeup, long hair, skirts and dresses, push-up bras. I tried really, really hard to fem it up, and I was so dissociated from my own like bodily discomfort. And then once I realized like, oh no, I'm trans mask. Um, any association to femininity, I couldn't wear my old clothes anymore that I used to like take selfies and feel really attractive in. Um, I like tried to put them on and I'm like, no, now I know this isn't, now I know I don't want this. And now it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can totally understand on that because, I think, I just wanted to fit in for a long time. And I was like, all right, people have told me I'm X. I guess I am. Let's, try to conform. And then I'm like, but wait a minute. But I'm not. And, in the last 5 or so years, it kind of started to crystallize. And when I kindly, I guess the egg cracked and it finally put it all together, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't like these clothes anymore.
Yeah. It's wild and it's a little relevant to some thoughts I had about being Arrow Ace, but like how much it can carry you through something inauthentic of just like if you're the kind of person who desperately needs the validation of other people or you're very lonely and you want like I coasted by on the wrong gender for a really long time because I found a lot of value and like euphoria in being attractive, in people being interested in me. And that kind of overrode any dysphoria because it's like, oh, I'm valuable. People think I'm hot. Oh, I look good. Oh, people are hitting on me. I have a partner. And that was very exciting because it was fulfilling a different need I had of like a fractured sense of self and a really low self-esteem. So I wasn't really cognizant of the dysphoria because I'm like, oh, people think I'm hot, and that's all that matters.
I can totally relate to that in many ways because I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to not be the loner that was, being bullied 24/7, that was, isolating in their room all the time because they didn't have any friends. And so I think I was just so desperate to fit in that when I got to, university and started, making connections, it's like, oh wow, I actually feel some self-worth. So I can totally relate to that. And then, as they say, first you realize you're ace, then you realize you're arrow, and then you're
Mhm.
like, what's gender?
Yeah, what is interestingly, I figured gender out first. But that's I think the events that the domino effects of right of I'm not the kind of person I think because of the autism I don't have very good interoception. I don't have a good sense of what I'm feeling, let alone if I'm feeling anything. My emotions come on a delay, so like I'll process something and be like offended or upset 3 days later for something that happened. And so I didn't realize I was trans until I LARPed and I played a character who was like gender neutral. And then I went, wait, I really like this. I like being masculine. I like being called they, them. Oh shit. And similarly, I didn't realize I was Aro Ace until I was in a long-term relationship and was really specifically analyzing because I felt really guilty about ending a relationship with someone who really, really liked me. And so I spent a lot of time like hyper analyzing myself and trying to figure out like, is this because I didn't want to make a mistake either, right? Of I don't want to break up with this person if I'm just going through a bout of depression because when you're depressed, it's hard to care about anything, right? Um, it's like, is this about a depression? Is this an effect from the medication? You know, and also the conflict of like, maybe I do like love this person, but we're having like libido differences. Like, so I had to like hyper analyze myself in the midst of processing needing to break up with this person. Um, and it caused me to be like, oh shit, wait, I have not experienced attraction before. Fuck.
Definitely can, relate in many ways with, the relationship that I had. It's like, I felt awful because I cared about them, I had emotional closeness, but I was like horrified of breaking up with them because I knew how much it would hurt them.
Hmm.
I knew it would be easy for me because that connection wasn't there to the same degree, but I knew how much it would hurt them. And so I tried to stay in as long as I could. And then I realized if this goes on any longer, it's just going to get even worse for them. And I
Yeah.
finally made the decision that, best to break the news to them now rather than continue to try to work on this relationship only for it to end in the same place that it's going to if I end it now. And it was
Yeah.
difficult. It was really hard.
Yeah. Especially because, like, the longer you go, there's like milestones people expect. So it's like, yeah, the first few years, you're just getting close. Then there's an expectation of moving in, and then expectation of, like, well, when are you going to propose? And so, like, if you took a year or two to figure it out, some people, especially like depending on your partner, there's such a pressure, especially for AFAB people, that it's like, oh, your biological clock is ticking. You only have so long before you're valuable and can have kids. And so there's also that pressure of like, if I spend several more years like inauthentically pursuing this, there could be some additional hurt feelings of like the conflict of like society's pressure of like you're only valuable until you hit 30. And so spending whatever few years you have left in a relationship that didn't pan out, I think it is better to kind of cut it sooner rather than later if you're not into it.
Absolutely. But it took me a long while to kind of come to this realization and really get a sense of what actually was happening, much like you said. And so it wasn't easy because I hadn't really had this situation before where I was in, what society would deem as a conventional relationship in many ways. And so I hadn't had to deal with this before. I tried, dating here and there, but it never really panned out. I wonder why.
Mhm.
And this one
Yeah.
happened a little bit more organically, I would say. There was sort of a friendship that evolved, and then we're like, all right, let's try a relationship. And that's, what happened in the end. But it was hard because I hadn't really been in that situation before. So here I am in my early to mid 30s, really figuring this out for the first time.
Hmm. And it's tough because like you kind of have to do it on your own. You like not fully, but like it's not, unless you have Arroway's parents or grandparents or family members, like it's not like most kids or most people where they can go and be like, so how did you know that you loved mom? How did you know that why did you choose to marry them? Like you can ask for advice and they can kind of share their anecdotal experience. And we don't have that. Um, so it's like, in addition to all of the queer history that's been erased, just, through all of the tragedies that's been happening in the past 100 years, a couple hundred years. So we don't have history to go off of. We don't have elders to reach out to. We don't have community. So it's a lot of trying to cobble together an understanding of these things on your own, like you're an archaeologist dusting off an ancient tome of someone's Tumblr post talking about how they're asexual and being like, what the fuck does that mean?
On that note, I certainly did not come across Ace Tumblr until much, much later, until 2020,
Hmm.
even though I guess it
Oh
has
wow.
existed since 2012, but that wasn't even on my radar then.
Hmm. I think it depends on what website you kind of grew up on. I grew up on Tumblr primarily. That was kind of my main website. But also, it's wild to me how entrenched I was in various queer communities, and yet it still went right past me. Like, I had a lot of queer friends, not like asexual or romantic friends, but I had a lot of queer friends. I was in the GSA at my high school, which is a gay straight alliance, um, where the teachers that we had walked us through all of the letters in the acronym asexual was on there. Um, so like I at least had the idea introduced to me, and yet Eve and like one of my like acquaintances in high school was asexual, and still it didn't click to me that that was me.
For me, I didn't have a GSA. There was no real open queer representation at my school. The school I was at was a fairly new school. It was a conservative private school, and I was the second graduating class, and we were a class of 30. So there just wasn't any representation. Obviously, no open Ace or Arrow representation, that's for sure. And so I really
Oh
didn't
yeah.
come across the term, I would say, until I was well into university. And that wasn't on my radar, as I said, until my late 20s when I first started having some friends say, hey, you might be Ace. And I was like, that can't be me. And then it started to make more and more sense. Like, yeah, that might be me. But it all
It's
happened
so
much
funny
later.
how other people can see it before you do, and it's so funny. But like I can see it too with other friends of mine where they'll say something and I'm like, normally it's a gender thing, where they'll just be like, yeah, every guy wishes they could flip a switch and suddenly be a woman. And I'm like, that's not the most cisgender thing a person could say. But you're not there yet. It's just it slips out, you say something and it's so glaringly obvious, but you don't register it.
The I had kind of a interesting situation where I guess I finally came out to the there's a group for folks who are autistic. So it's basically neuroqueer folks. And after coming out on the stream here, and I guess it was in June last year, I came out at the group as non-binary. And somebody said, "Oh, I already thought you had come out." So it was like
No.
5 or 6 people right there and then told me, "Yeah, we figured you were non-binary long before you told us." And I'm like, "Well, you figured it out before me."
Sometimes the egg is made of glass and you just you don't realize that you're saying, and it's happened to me so many times, like just people will say things and I'm like, that's not the most cishet thing you could have said. And it might be nothing. but it's probably not. And then like a year later, they're like, hey, by the way, I'm queer. And I'm like, no, who could have foretold this?
So yeah, that's sort of my story in, coming to figure out my identity. I've talked about it in various degrees, but I don't think I've really talked about it in any great detail before. So you'll probably hear this on Sunday when I'm a guest interviewee on Phoebe on TV stream, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about my experiences, hopefully, in that episode. But
Yeah, you've been interviewing so many other people, and now it's time for the Tai deep lore.
exactly, you get the Tai Waiti.
Arrow aces aren't allowed to have secrets. We have to, everyone needs to know all of our thoughts and feelings. It needs to be broadcast. We have to counteract how little rep we have.
Exactly, exactly. On that note, Julia Sandra Decker, coins the term uh, invisible orientation for asexuality in 2014. I would hard argue that aromanticism faces a lot of similar challenges as well. So while the term invisible orientation refers to asexuality, I think both asexuality and aromanticism have, similar challenges, experience great degrees of erasure on multiple levels.
Oh
Why
yeah,
do you think that is?
I do think like they're both erased. I do think just my experience is that aromantic is even more like as invisible as asexuality is to a lot of people. I think people at least know it. Um, aromantic, it's not even on people's radars. And I feel like I don't know. I think bup, 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 bup. Sorry, my brain stopped working for a second. The question being, can you repeat it so that my brain registers it again?
Asexuality is often known as the invisible orientation. Uh, I would argue aromanticism faces many similar challenges as well, if not even more in some ways. Um, Erasure of both identities is unfortunately very common. Do you have any thoughts as to why this is?
There it is. Yeah. I mean, I do. I have thoughts and feelings. I mean, I think it's a combo of a lot of things. I think most big movements are the cause of several um like ideologies kind of meshed together. I think that rep is really poor from like a point of like the relics and trauma of like religious colonization, because especially in like Canada and the US and Britain, a lot of places colonized by the English, there is this kind of monogamous, puritanical, patriarchal standard. Um, and that kind of permeates the majority of the foundation of what our culture is built on. And then it gets more complicated when it comes to like women, where, it's still pretty relatively recent that women get to choose who they're in love with, and people are fighting it to this day with legislation. Um, but like, they would get traded for power, or they would just get claimed by a man who had enough power or was dedicated enough to be like, you're mine now. People still in like certain cultures have arranged marriages. So it hasn't entirely been phased out. So there's that foundation there as well. Um, and like any deviation from this like foundation, it challenges laws and power structures that are trying to be set in place to manipulate people, like the legislation about taking away women's reproductive rights, which for one source is like the only way that really shitty men can trap a woman. because she's too terrified to traumatize a baby. So if he gives her a baby and she can't do anything about that, then she has to, in a lot of situations, stay with him. Women didn't get to have bank accounts a couple hundred years ago. And so it's like it's dangerous, I think, from a representation standpoint, to imply um, that you should do what makes you happy, because a lot of you don't succeed in this world by working hard. You succeed in this world by not having ethics and being cunning enough to find loopholes and manipulating and taking advantage of people. And if the world was literally do what makes you happy and don't do any more than that, a lot of very manipulative people can't profit off of that lifestyle. They want people to yearn for a $3 million house with 2.5 kids and a dog and a model as a wife. And they want you to think that that's what you need to be happy. Um, because then they can sell that to you and they can work you to the bone, 12 hours a day, chucking boxes or doing construction work or working on a farm 12 hours a day. Um, just like wasting your body away trying to achieve this dream in the hopes that if you just get there, you'll be happy. But by the time you get there, they've already worked you to the bone. They've already made their money. But then there's also like, I feel like it's also kind of why they're legislating against trans people, but also like trans women especially, is when people see living proof that the rules that they've been abiding by are bullshit, um, it kind of crumbles this like very sticks and mud structure that people have built castles on. You know, the idea like trans people are living embodiments that gender roles are bullshit, that sex is fluid, that men are not automatically biologically superior, that women are not inferior, that there is more to life than procreation. Um, but that shakes the foundation of a society that wants people to have a white picket fence and crank out babies and, you know, live a very cookie cutter life.
And there's a
And then there's
well-known,
also, Mhm.
or I was going to say, there's a
No, no, no.
well-known psychological, um, kind of reaction that people have that when their whole frame of belief is attacked, they're going to double down. And no matter what evidence you present otherwise, they're going to rebel against that or find ways to reject that new evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's so many people, and I feel like most of the people who have the power and are making these decisions are like they're older people. They're people that have lived a long life in a rigid structure. And then I think a lot of them can't stomach realizing that they've done everything they were told to do and they aren't happy. And that soul crushing like feeling of like you can't get that time back. You can't get those years back. And so you can't go and live a life where you didn't marry someone maybe you weren't into, that you didn't get to pursue knowledge or start a farm or just make spend more time with your friends. um and that's, I think, something people they can't even, it's like a raw nerve that they can't even touch, and they don't want any reminders of thinking that they wasted their life doing things they thought would make them happy but they didn't.
You're so right there. So, so right. Uh, on that note, kind of thinking about what is the thing in life that has felt the most freeing and given me the biggest boost to my mental health and confidence was coming to the realization, yes, I'm Ace. Yes, I'm Aro. And I know I don't have to abide by what society's been telling me I should be doing, which is finding that right person, pursuing the relationship escalator. When I finally said, no, that's not me, it was like a huge weight off of my shoulders that I just didn't
Oh yeah.
know had been there the whole time.
Hmm. And that's not just like an Arrow Ace thing. Like I've known like you could see it all across the queer community of like compulsive heterosexuality. Like I know so many people who were going to marry or were married to a man, and then the realization of like later on being like, actually I'm a lesbian. Like to get to that point of like and like how much happier they are pursuing something authentic. But or like I know a friend who was following the motions of like being in a relationship with someone, and I don't know necessarily if it was like a sexuality thing, that he was just in a relationship with someone that wasn't right for him, and but like was very locked in, was very willing to pursue it all the way to marriage, and then just kind of had a dream one day where they had broken up and he felt so much relief. And then the subsequent soul crushing of, oh, I shouldn't feel relieved about someone I love. But like the relief of like, oh, I don't have to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And very much in the same sort of boat, the relief that came when that relationship finally ended. I felt horrible for the other person, but for me, it was like
Hmm.
this huge weight had been lifted off me. But
Hmm.
I felt absolutely awful for them.
Oh yeah, it's a big twisted mess of feelings because like it like relationships are also just they're like not only are they about like caring about someone and loving someone, but they're also like sometimes you become the other person's emotional support, especially in a queer relationship. Like a lot of people's families don't accept them. And so it's like, wow, I'm the only person that this person has because their family has disowned them. Or, I'm the only other queer person in our small town. And so those additional factors that just kind of tangle up together of like, it's not just breaking up with this person. It might be that I'm this person's only emotional confidant, or some people are their partner's caretakers, like physically if they're disabled. Um, so there's all of these like really tricky, complicated layers to a relationship and subsequently ending one.
Absolutely. It's very difficult. I was just looking at what GK Fire Dev mentioned, and the obviously the horrible bills that have been not only rammed through in Saskatchewan but as also Alberta. They were talking about the one in Saskatchewan, which Bill 137 very much reads like many of the bills in the states, which basically said if you're under 16, you need consent from your parents to use pronouns that aren't the ones that were assigned at birth, and it's so fucked up. It's
So
just
stupid.
so fucked up.
Like it's showing the hand that they don't actually care about kids, or don't care about like, oh, they're too young to make like it is such an easily reversible to just try a new name, to
Mm-hmm.
just try new pronouns. It
Mm-hmm.
like that's not permanent.
No.
Let them fuck, especially like, on a very watered down level. It's sort of like, parents not letting their kids dye their hair or not letting them dress the way they want, where it's like you're going to repress them to the point where the second they turn 18, the second that they get autonomy, that dam is going to break. Why wouldn't you want them to explore and figure themselves out when they're safe, when they have you as like a safety net, when, there's not a lot of consequences for kids, you know, as opposed to being, 25 years old, you have to pay
Mm.
rent, you lose your job, you be homeless.
Exactly.
A 13-year-old who wants to go by they them, like they're not going to lose their job, they're not going to be homeless.
No.
Like it's such a low stakes experiment of just seeing if they like it, but so many parents are just like, no, this is my little doll and it's going to be exactly the way I want it to be, and it's not going to change because I don't want it to change. Like, again, a very watered down version, but like I was born blonde haired, very, very light blonde hair. And my like that was a very big point of pride for people around me. Um, that was so like beautiful. And it was like I think a lot of moms especially like when they have like a little girl, they treat them like a little doll and they're very possessive about the hair. They don't want the hair to get cut short. They don't want them to dye their hair because, oh, it's so beautiful and it doesn't matter what the kid wants. It's just about like preserving this little doll that they have for as long as possible.
Absolutely. And I know my parents never let me do anything interesting with my hair. No, no dye. No, nothing. Just the basic cut. That's all you're allowed. They were very strict. And yeah, the first thing I wanted to do when I was 18 is get the hell out of there, move over to the island so I didn't have to be around them.
It's like I get, sure, you don't want your 13-year-old to get a full body, like, tattooed back piece.
Yeah,
That's fair.
that makes
Most
sense.
13-year-olds are probably going to get a Rick and Morty tattoo that they're going to regret in 5 years. That's fair. But, like, hair grows back. Let them dye it green. It's
Exactly.
fine.
Hair is like one of the quickest things to grow back. Exactly. Especially when you're, 13 and you're not losing hair like I am starting to do.
It's like in the same vein, let them try different pronouns, let them try different hair, let them try different names. If kids are like fickle, they're gonna do it for like a week and then they're gonna get bored of it and they're gonna go, actually, I like my regular name. I like the name I was born with. Like, there's literally no point in not letting them explore that.
Exactly. So seeing bills like that rammed through here in Canada is not only scary, but also definitely very much a sign of the times. And a lot of people talk about Canada perhaps being this wonderful place for the queer community when there's actually many, many examples of why it's maybe not. But I guess it's all relative perhaps to what's happening in the US, but things have
Yeah.
been
It's
moving in the
also
wrong
depends on
direction.
where,
Exactly. It depends on where. BC's
but
always
also like
been,
mhm.
I was saying, BC's always kind of been much more liberal in that regard. Um, the prairies, unfortunately, not so much, and they've gotten a lot worse in the last 5 or so years, at least in terms of legislation. They've always been conservative in many other ways, but then you got, I think, was it New Brunswick that also passed legislation in the last few years?
Don't know.
I think it was New Brunswick.
For or against?
Similar along the lines of what Saskatchewan did.
Ugh. It is, I think it's easier to pass really reductive legislation in places that don't have a strong population density. And I feel like that's also why you see in the US, like the more rural, the more isolated communities are the most like dangerously militantly religious and also the most like bigoted.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that like Ontario and like the denser provinces and cities are sunshine and rainbows, because I've had plenty of friends in Toronto, for example,
Mm-hmm.
get slurs shouted at them and shit thrown at them.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
but I think a good part, especially when you're bringing up like why you think that representation isn't great, is also about like, I mean, proximity to an ace person if you're in a really isolated area, but also it's so much easier for reductive and dangerous beliefs to fester when, you're in an area that is, poorer, so that they're not providing like ample education to people, or it's kind of like, I know like there are certain cities, and like there's a lot that's rooted in racism. There's certain cities in like the US where it's sort of like a pipeline where they're like, we're going to let these school systems fail so that we funnel all of these like kids of color into, the justice system, or because a lot of like, for example, the US prison system is just legal slavery. Um and I went on a bit of a tangent there. The A to B did not line up to
Yeah.
circling back to being Arrow Ace. But I have so many thoughts and feelings all the time.
Yeah,
My brain moves so
absolutely.
fast. But
Same.
being in more isolated areas does make it a lot easier for reductive mindsets to flourish.
Absolutely. You've got that urban rural divide on many levels, and, low population versus high population density on so many fronts. We are about to hit an ad break here, so maybe we take a little bit of a break here and grab some water, and then come back. And you want to chat about some of the most frustrating misconceptions when we come back?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's head on over to the Be Right Back screen so nobody misses out on what's been an absolutely fascinating chat so far. We'll see you back in about 5 minutes, folks.
Till then.
Welcome back, folks. Thanks for sticking around through the ad break. Let's chat about misconceptions. And oh, are there many around asexuality and aromanticism? What are some of the most frustrating, irritating misconceptions that you've experienced, Caber?
Um, I think like it's pretty common to see like people think that asexual people can't or don't have sex, or that aromantic people like hate other people, or don't like affection, or don't like kissing, or like they want to be left alone completely. Um, I also feel like I feel like I've seen some depictions, or like the way people talk about aromantic people specifically, like they're like sociopaths. Like
Oh, yeah.
if you're incapable of being in love with someone, then you're like emotionless. And like, not to say that sociopaths are freaks, but like the tone that people take is like that you're an emotionless freak if you can't be in love with someone. Um, which sucks. Or like
Absolutely.
I've s- I've seen people who are like demi-romantic or demisexual, for example. They'll talk about their experience, and then I've seen a lot of people like snarkily reply like, that's just normal. Hookup culture really makes you think that you're broken. And like I feel like a lot of people, I feel like a lot, maybe even most people can like look at a stranger and they experience feelings. And it's not just like like a hookup culture, like immediate horny. But like some people do experience attraction, or like I think personally, personal theory, that love at first sight is just baseline attraction, and it's just that people don't know what attraction is. Um, and I think a lot of people have experience, like they'll just be like, "Oh, I was at school and this new boy came in and my heart stopped." And I'm like, "That's right there." A lot of demi people, they don't have never had that. And that's the distinction, that's the difference. Or honestly, like the most I feel personally, most frustrating misconception is like people mistaking attraction for true love. Um, and like the way that people talk about it, where like I'll see people describe, and granted, like I'm very aware I'm Aries, I have not experienced this thing, but when people talk about it and they're like, oh, we there were sparks when we kissed, and like my skin tingled when we touched, and there were fireworks, and I'm pretty sure that's just attraction. That's just baseline level attraction. The people like it's true love, we're soulmates, and like I feel like that also makes things a lot worse when even people who've experienced attraction don't know what it is. And like I think back to like in high school where I knew people who would describe the like baseline symptoms of attraction and be like, I'm in love with this person. I've never felt this way before. It wasn't, I dated someone before and it wasn't like this. But this must be real because I'm feeling something for this person. And then like they date a year and then they break up. Um, and it's just like I feel like it's so drilled into people's heads to ignore their own emotions and like dissociate from their bodies that like they don't like understand what it's like to have their own opinions or desires. Like it's very hard drilled into people's heads like, whatever's on the front page of a magazine or on a porn site, that's what you have to think is hot. Like I've seen people like they joke about it, but like jokes that girls make where it's like, "Oh, I showed this guy that I'm dating to my friend group and they're all just ripping him apart like, "Oh, no, honey, he's ugly." And it's like all of these tiny little in like you can't even quantify all these little moments that just chisel away anyone's sense of understanding the way they feel. Um, where it's like it doesn't matter if he makes your heart pound, they got to be skinny or they got to be tall or they got to be rich or they got to be pale or they got to be hairless or like all these little things where it's like no, your natural bodily like attraction to this person wrong because they're not rich. Wrong because they have armpit hair. And that's just drilled into people so hard and it frustrates me so much. And then also, if someone is into you, you are treated like the scum of the earth, like a big asshole for not being into them, as if it is a conscious choice that you make. When like attraction is an uncontrollable bodily response. You don't choose to be attracted to someone. It's supposed to hit you sideways. But if a nice guy comes up to you earnestly and says that he likes you, and you're genuinely honest and go, I don't feel anything for you, then you're a fucking, then you like, so many people would call you a bitch, would call you heartless for not even giving him a chance. And it's like, it's not a choice. Like, acting like if someone tells me a joke and I don't, like, I'm not gonna, and I don't laugh, it's not that I didn't give the joke a chance. It's just I didn't find it funny. Or like, space fiction's cool. It's fine. I don't really care much about it. Like some things with it are cool, but like I don't really like the Mass Effect games, for example, because I'm just not really into aliens. I've tried to play them, they're not interesting to me. But high fantasy is my shit. I see Link from Legend of Zelda, my head's turning. I'm very into that world and I don't have to think about it. I don't have to give Link from Legend of Zelda a chance. There's just this instinctual, immediate, like, that's interesting to me. And this misconception that attraction is a choice is infuriating.
Absolutely. And Duke brings up a good point in that, we got to think about it from, the split attraction model. For allosexual folks, primary attraction is sexual. The romantic part, I think, is secondary for many folks. So I think, most people are hardwired to, based on their sexual attraction, and that's what gives you that initial spark, perhaps. And the romantic attraction is kind of secondary, but for allo ace folks, obviously, the sexual attraction isn't there. So, we got to think about things a little bit differently. For Aro Ace, well, tertiary attraction, maybe.
But I also wonder, like, when it comes to sexual attraction, I wonder even there, like, I watch a lot of like videos or video diaries or like people vlogging or just like people talking about their experiences or like like those like tongue-in-cheek videos where it's like the two people come up and then you swipe left or right based on a first impression of whether you like this person, like all these little dating YouTube shows. Um And I genuinely wonder whether like I feel like there's like a separate like people don't even understand fully what maybe sexual attraction fully is as opposed to just being horny and someone having an appropriate vessel to project that on where it's like I don't know how to articulate it this well, but like with sexual attraction, like I think some people are just lonely or there's a specific sexual act that they want to do where it's like, some people have a very rigid like they want a top exclusively or they want a bottom exclusively or like there's very specific or like some people are more aggressive or some people are more passive, some people just want vanilla missionary. There's a lot of different ways and sometimes it might not even be that you are sexually attracted to this person. It's just that they're the only top in 100 miles and you just really want to be topped or that you like people with really big boobs. And so it's not that you're sexually attracted to this person, you just like boobs. And this person happens to have them. Um, and I think there's like I feel like there's something there where people kind of mistake objectifying a person and getting sexual gratification from that, mistaking it for sexual attraction to the person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that very much can happen, especially when we're dictated by society what we're supposed to lust for. All around
Mhm,
us from the time we were born, we're told this is the body you have to have. This is what you should be looking for. So I think that very
mhm.
much does happen for sure. It certainly complicates the situation, I think, for everyone in many ways. Because we're told this is the body type that you have to have. This is what you should be going for. It
Yeah.
certainly does complicate the picture.
And like in a weird way, I feel like this does tie into representation a little bit, where it's like, I think if there's a very rigid body type or style that is deemed to be attractive, that is what is going to get cranked out across all of media. There's a very, like, so the standard for a hot man is like a Dorito shaped, severely dehydrated six pack, um, square jaw, no body fat. Like that's kind of the that's being pushed. So that's what you see in like all of the movies. And so if you have any other alternative attraction, you're not gonna see it. And if you never see it, it doesn't get triggered, and then you don't know you have it. Um, or it's so hard to find where it's like you see all of these like movies with the femme fatale or like the guy being, I don't know what the guy word version of um being the figure of attraction is, but if you've seen like 100 movies and they're all this same cookie cutter like beach babe and Dorito man, and there's all these like slow panning shots of their body, like it's I feel almost like I'm like sometimes I get really agitated when I watch movies because it feels like they're trying to force me to feel something that I don't want to feel. Where it's like they'll do these slow panning shots up a woman's body, and I'm like, she's nice looking, but you're taking a full minute of me just staring at her cleavage, and I'm not feeling anything, and you really want me to. Um, and
Mood.
she's a lovely lady, but I'm being because with movies and stuff, the director and the camera person basically controls your eyes. And with music, with lighting, with sound effect cues, you can kind of like you could play a harp. You can kind of pull the emotional strings to make people feel things that they wouldn't. You can make people care for characters that aren't real. You can subvert expectations to make people like really, really like a guy and then pull the rug out from under them and make them like, oh no, he's betrayed us. He's not real. He didn't actually betray you, but you feel that. And I feel in a sense that like, and I don't think it's like fully intentional. It's mostly the gaze of the director. But like if someone's making a film where it's like, oh, and we want to make sure that you think that this babe on a car is really hot, so we're gonna pose her in a certain way and costume her in a certain way and play sultry music and like do a close-up shot of like the main character gulping so you get that visceral like because some people have like a sympath similar to how like if you yawn, someone else will yawn. I feel like a lot of people have a sympathetic where if they see someone experiencing emotion, it's almost like they can feel it. And it's almost like this forced perspective by proxy that people can get through media, where it's like, I'm not actually attracted to this man, but I've watched him be wet and shirtless for 5 minutes. And like, everyone else thinks he's really hot, so I guess he's all right.
Absolutely. And then, for many ace folks, mistaking aesthetic attraction for sexual attraction. Yeah, I can
Mm,
recognize, this person is aesthetically nice to look at. And for many folks that are ace spec, that's what we think sexual attraction might be. And if we're told
yeah.
this is the aesthetic that we're supposed to like, yeah, I can see how that can be very confusing. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there is definitely a like, either I can recognize that someone is attractive by looking at them, or like, there are definitely times I've seen people where I'm like, I can be like, yes, you're very hot. I enjoy looking at you. There's no secondary thought. I have no motivational desire to do anything. You're just nice to look at. Um, but like, and that's I also think why I struggled a lot realizing I was Aro Ace was because I liked looking at people. I could recognize that someone was hot. Um, but there was no bodily reaction and there was no incentive to it was just like, oh yeah, they're nice to look at, and I'll look for like 5 minutes and then I'll get bored, and I'll go do something else. And other people don't feel or do that.
No, absolutely not.
Like some people will see someone hot and be like, I have to go talk to them, and I'm like, no, they're just minding their business. They're nice
Yeah.
to look at. And now I've got a game on my phone, and that was nice. But like some people, like I have to talk to them, or I have to go kiss them, or like there's such a strong compulsion that pulls them to action that like I've just never experienced.
So fair. GK Fire Dev mentioned, I find it funny the stereotype male and female body, in media, because they grew up with roller derby. Most of the women in roller derby tend to be a little more muscular and obviously strong, even to the point of cracking a watermelon between their thighs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The stereotypes are wild, like to the point, and I think you could see it in a lot of like fringe groups, like the incel community, where they all think that like women are the same, for example. Where if you isolate people enough and their only access to the world is this very narrow little view, people can get deluded into thinking that that is the way the entire world is. So there's people, I think, a lot of people who probably genuinely think that the average man, and the average woman look like those like skinny, chiseled, uh, depictions you see in like a medical book, when like the average person probably has more fat on them. Or if you want to actually see the scale of like I don't know. You'll look up like different body types, and usually you'll get clothing models where it's like someone really tall and really skinny, someone curvaceous, and then someone who's like very plus sized. And that's kind of like the scale. And it's like, okay, so these are the three shapes people come in. But then I've looked at there was a long lineup of like Olympians, and it was like the top performers in those sports, and the vast diversity in their body shapes, in their shoulder lengths, in like their weights, in it, and like I think people just have such a narrow like representation. I think also solidifies like a confirmation bias almost, where it's
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
well, every single movie has people like this. So that's the way the world is. Because if it wasn't, there would be different movies. But also, I don't think people recognize that while a lot of different people want to make movies, only like a small handful of people are rich enough to be producers. And those
And
producers. Mhm.
and most of the big feature films come from North America. There's a very Western North American bias on what those characters in the movies are going to look like, and it obviously has a huge influence on, what we think of as representation all across the board.
Yeah. It is very like culturally narrow. And then on top of it being culturally narrow, it's also there's like maybe like 20 rich dudes who are
Hmm.
old money, who have always had their white knuckle grip on what has made them their fortune. And so they're the people running the production studios where it's like, I'm not going to pay for this depiction. I want this main actress to be hot so that we sell money. So recast her so that she's my standard of hot. Or we're not going to tell this queer story, fucking Disney, where the animators have to fight tooth and nail to have two characters hold hands, let alone kiss. And even then it gets censored and taken out in other like regions of the streaming platform, which is like all of this old like these very small niche groups of old money that shape media to their very narrow view set. And then people think, well, all media's like this, so this must be the way the world is, when really it's just like, no, you're just kind of in a daisy chain of like 20 old dudes who don't like anything but salt and pepper. And they boil their chicken, and they don't like anything that isn't what has been done for the past 300 years. But also all of the stamping out anything that wasn't a very cookie cutter cultural standard.
Absolutely. And then you try to throw in Ace or Arrow representation into that, and it's like, what options have we got? And there's very little. Kind of
Yeah.
coming back to media representation, and why it's so hard to find good Ace rep or Arrow rep, even more so.
hmm I also think it's so distant because, like, I think some people can stretch their imagination because they understand love, they understand romance, so they can understand, okay, you feel the same as me, just for someone of the same gender. And I think it's so far removed from their concept of understanding to just not feel that. But rather than like, minding their own business, they're just like, oh, you don't feel the way that I feel. And I can't wrap my head around, like, I can't empathize with that. So you got to stop doing that.
Very much so. That is such a good point. The fact that, what, you and I experience in terms of attraction or a lack thereof doesn't fit what I feel, therefore, well, I can't comprehend this. And it leads, unfortunately, to very poor depictions and very narrow ideas of what, asexuality and aromanticism are. And uh, the book by Sharonda J. Brown absolutely does a fantastic job at breaking down the uh, horrible stereotypes of aces and arrows in particularly mainstream media from, say, the 70s and 80s, and just how horribly depicted Ace And arrow forks were. They were the villains. They were the evil villains in James Bond. They were the... I can't remember. It's been too long since I watched them. But basically, if you look at many of the Bond villains from early James Bond, they were all ace. And because they were ace and had no sexual feeling, well, you must be a villain, right? And
That's so interesting.
yeah, Sharonda J. Brown has a whole chapter devoted to how much Ace and Arrow representation is villainized in James Bond and many of the really popular media from the 70s and 80s. And then talking about the only Arrow Ace person that possibly could exist is the Jughead archetype, who's the clown and doesn't want any social interaction whatsoever.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, they're just too stupid to find love, or they're just like a dopey animal, and they're just there to be a fun little sidekick.
And then if it is there, it's very one dimensional. That is their character. There's nothing interesting about them beyond them being Arrow Ace, beyond them being antisocial, because, well, if you're Arrow Ace, you have to be antisocial. But what about somebody who happens to be Ace, who happens to be Arrow? But that's not their entire identity. That
Oh,
doesn't process in many of these mainstream depictions of the character.
I also think a lot of depictions in like media, they're trying to sell you something, right? It's very rare that art is created for free. Like even beautiful cartoons that are made, the only way that those cartoons get made is because studios are trying to then sell merchandise to fund the animators that they just made. Like they're trying to make a profit. And I think while I don't necessarily believe the idea that like sex sells, I do think that it is easy to manipulate because it is one of like I think the few sensory experiences that are very, very positive. Um, and so you can kind of, and it's very compelling. Like when people feel uh sexual desire, um they are compelled to do something about it. It's not so much like oh, you make someone feel like content on a nice summer day. They're going to go sit in a park and they're going to breathe. And you can't really, I hope we never end up selling people air. Whereas with like trying to coax people into feeling like sexual or romantic things, um you can sell them on dating apps. You can sell them on counseling or like life coaches. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to bag a woman in 3 easy steps. Or, you know, selling them Viagra, or condoms. Like, and I think for people trying to depict, like, it's sort of the contentment thing where like you can make a Arrow Ace character, it's not going to coax anyone into action. Whereas if you make a very sexy character, people are going to want to buy their big booby figurine and put it with their other big booby anime figurines. Um, so I feel like a lot of is just that a lot of people make art to just express themselves and tell really interesting stories. Um, Also to sell diamond rings. That's a very good point, Fire
Yeah,
Dev.
absolutely.
Um, but I think you can't really sell people on being aromantic or asexual because
No,
they're just, I'm going to sell you the idea that you can sit in your house, eat cake, and be happy. I mean, I guess you could sell people cake. I guess that's merch. They're just not creative enough. They have to
no,
get on that cake market.
they do. Or that garlic bread market.
Oh my God, yeah. Make an ace character, make their gimmick garlic bread, and then partner with a pizza place and just slap their face on the garlic bread. You'll sell buckets.
But yeah, the best arrow representation I've come across almost always in books, and almost always, of course, written by folks with lived experience of asexuality and aromanticism themselves. You know,
Oh yeah.
the book that I was a beta reader for, Be the Sea by Clara Ward, had several aspec characters. And the refreshing thing about it is, yeah, they're ace, but that's not the main part of them. They happen to be ace, but they're much more interesting than that.
Mhm.
And seeing that kind of representation is really refreshing because it's like, that's what real people are. They aren't just their sexuality, they aren't just
Yeah.
their romantic attraction. They're much more than that. But in
In
order
terms of
to,
like,
sorry,
I don't know. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I guess in order to create a character that I guess can be come across in mainstream media, you've got to tokenize it or focus on some singular aspect of it, particularly when they're not the main character. And I think that's part of the problem is often it's not the main character who's Ace or Arrow. It's a side character that we see very infrequently.
Mhm. But I also think it's that a lot of times, at least in my experience in writing and knowing people who write, often the main character is like in some way, it's not always a self-insert. So often it is. But sometimes it's just like a bit of yourself bleeds into the character. And I think so a lot of people who aren't Arrow Ace are writing stories and they're like, okay, well, I need the other characters to be different and I need this not to seem like a big self-insert story. So I'm going to start adding traits of friends I know or people that I've seen or concepts I'm curious about. And but they don't know those things. So they're very one-dimensional of just like, okay, this person doesn't want love because isn't that wacky and wild? Um, and then similarly to how there's a very limited amount of producers. If, say, an Arrow Ace person was like, hey, I want to write a book about fantasy where there's no love and romance, publishing companies want to make money. And they're like, well, we only make money if we do like things with romance. There has to be like you'll have an editor who will read over your book and be like, okay, but maybe they can get together at the end. Maybe there can be a little tension or like a love triangle that makes you think they're gonna get with like it's that same influence where even if someone is doing a good depiction, there's all these other hands in the kitchen that are adding things here and there and taking things out based on their own, like what they like or what they want to make money off of.
Absolutely. That's a really good point that, I hadn't really thought about in that. Yeah, the editor's got a huge influence on what the final product's going to look like. I certainly know that, in the academic context, the how much input my paper's going to have from the external reviewers, and then as the beta reader, how much of an input my biases, my input is going to have on the final product. Just like if you're writing a book or creating a movie, it's the folks with power that dictate the final outcome.
Yeah. I think a lot about it's not canon, but I think a lot about the Hunger Games and Katniss Everdeen and both me and my friend both feel very strongly that she is aspec coded. Um just because of like the internal dialogue of like how uninterested she is in the like how just completely uninterested she is in her suitors in like the ways where like they'll describe them kissing and she feels nothing. She's thinking about something else. She's thinking about going out to hunt. She's thinking about the trauma of like the capital. She's not described as being attracted to these people. She's a very neutral way of talking about them. And so we both kind of like headcanon her as on the spec like on the I mean also a little autistic, but on the Arrow A spectrum. Um and yet, and like we both have our like, we both agree it's like the ending of like her story where like at the very beginning she said she never wanted kids, she didn't want to be a housewife, she didn't want to have that life, and then at the end, um she gets married and she has kids, and there's like this idyllic, like the slow motion, she's in a sundress in a field with her children, and it's just like a ugh. So did your editor go to you and go, we want a nice happy ending for families to feel good, so we're going to do this one that's been done 30 million times?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, because you listen to her dialogue, her descriptions of these men that are trying to suit her, she doesn't give a fuck. She's kissing them because it's like a good move in the game. She's looking after them because she cares about them as people, but she's not, at no point she's like, and I was so distracted by his glistening pecs and his chiseled jawline, and I lost myself for a moment because he was so hot. It's always like the dude approaches her. He's like, "I'm into you," and then she goes, "Oh shit, fuck. Well, I don't want you to hate me, so I guess we're kissing."
Yep. Duke said, "Holy cow, y'all are still going?" I was talking to my UPS carrier and friend for a while, and I'm like, "Yep, still ripping apart mainstream media as usual."
We have so many thoughts and feelings on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. That that line between what is romance, what is platonic can be difficult,
Yeah.
especially, when
When I,
you're dealing with QPRs and, what that looks like.
mhm. I like when I was younger, we used to call them like squishes, where it was like a friend crush, where, and then like that's so real of like really thinking someone's cool, really wanting to be their friend. You don't want to like kiss them or be intimate with them. It's just like, oh, I really want them in my life. I think they're really cool. This like hyper fixation on them, um, that can make people really like giddy and really like nervous in like a good way. Um, like that's absolutely a real thing.
Absolutely. The I certainly took me a long time to figure out you know, what is just wanting to get to know somebody versus, what is actually romantic. I think what I mistook as romantic crushes in high school most likely were I just want to be friends with this person really badly. I think they're cool as fuck. And I'm
Yeah.
not.
I find that conflict too, where like, especially because like I physical touch is one of my favorite love languages. It's how I show people love. I love platonically cuddling with people. Or like when I was younger, I would go to parties and you do spin the bottle, or like you kiss people. And it's not that you want to date them, it's just that kissing is fun. Um and that conflict where like a lot of people believe that that degree of intimacy is exclusively for a romantic partner. And so it's like, okay, well, if I want these things and I enjoy these things, then I need to be dating someone because I want and enjoy these things. Hi, Pseudo. Welcome in.
Also, I just clued in that your username is the genus of the Douglas fir. I like that. Pseudotsuga. False fir.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. I just clued in on
Oh,
it.
that rules. That rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. The biogeography kicking back in from many years ago.
The PhD activating.
But what species of pseudotsuga are you?
I don't know enough about trees. I'm just like tree nice. I like to sit outside. Tree nice. You pat tree. Tree nice.
I grew up on the West Coast, so I'm always drawn to the conifers. I
Ooh.
yearn for the cedars, for the um, firs are cool, pines are cool, but I really yearn for that, deep red hue of the cedar and that, really distinctive smell that coniferous trees
They do
have.
have they have a really nice smell, that's for sure.
Yeah. And out here in Ontario, you just don't get them to the same degree. And I'm like, this isn't a forest. This is like half a forest, especially in the winter when there's no leaves on the trees.
Yep.
Yep, that's a Douglas fir right there. Pseudotsuga menziesi.
I'm Googling it because I want to see them. It's only showing me their pine cones, which are cute. Oh, I've seen a couple of these trees. I grew up around a few of them.
But they're not a
They are
true
nice
fir.
and they are fluffy.
They're not a true fir,
No?
hence the name false fir.
Oh, language has little hints in it if you just pick it apart.
Mm-hmm. Especially when they're, hints that are based in Latin like that. Pseudo.
hmm
Little biogeography lesson. You're always going to get some interesting little science tidbit in the podcast,
Yeah.
particularly
Yeah, you came
climate
here.
or sorry.
You came in here for Pride talks, and it's like, nope, you're also learning about nature. This is a nature lesson now. I hope you like trees.
Yeah, episode 23. The fact of the day is Pseudotsuga menziesi is a Douglas fir.
They're beautiful trees, and you should go up to one and just give it a little pat.
I agree. Absolutely, really good point. Not everything is as it first appears. Really good point.
Ooh,
I
that is a
love
really
that.
nice reminder of that. I love when people have like nice, like deep meaning names. It's very poetic. I think that's very cool. Mine does not have that degree of thought but put behind it. So it's always nice when it's like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting to be read poetry today. How nice."
And then there's me. It's like, yeah, this was a username or this was a nickname my friends gave me in high school, and I bet nobody's ever used it, so I'm going to use it as my username on Twitch, and that's how Ty
It
EYE
worked.
came about.
Listen, there's poetry and fun and whimsy. It's very Shakespearean to just have a fun, goofy time.
Yeah. But mine was, yeah, this nickname I bet is never going to be used, so might as well use this as my username on everything.
hmm Oh, I just get the Ness one. The GK Fire. Oh, I get it.
Oh
That's great.
yeah, really good point. I totally missed that until you pointed it out. I'm embarrassed to say I completely went over my head until you pointed it out just now.
Listen, samesies. We're in the same boat.
But now I'm thinking back, yeah, especially in the early N64 Smash Bros. GK Fire, GK Fire.
Yep.
Yeah,
I've never played any of the games. I just played Smash Bros. And I've heard that
yeah.
line enough that as soon as it was pointed associated to Ness, I could hear it in my
Same.
brain.
As soon as you pointed that out, first thing I hear is that Smash Bros. Uh, sound over and over again in my head because I would just spam it whenever I would play as Ness. I would love to play Earthbound. It looks like an awesome game, and I've heard some really fantastic things about Earthbound, particularly from the SNES days. Just haven't had the opportunity to play it. But one of these days, we're going to play Earthbound. Just got to find the
Yeah, one
time.
day.
Just got to find the time.
It's not, especially cooking up a PhD. I hope you find it one day.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like, when do I fit this in between the podcast, the PhD, the running the support groups, the 8 other support groups I attend a month?
Oh boy. Yeah, I the one thing I don't really associate with a doctor is free time.
Yeah, I probably spend more than I should on things other than my PhD, unfortunately, which is, definitely contributed to me. Taking 8 years to do it is not the only reason. There's a good whole host of other reasons why it's taken me 8 years, but it's certainly played a little bit of a role, I can admit.
Listen, you deserve to have fun. You deserve, it doesn't matter how long it takes. There's no shame in it taking 8 years, no shame in it taking 20 years. Some people will never have a PhD, and it's still cool that you're acquiring one.
And I've at this point come to realize that I need balance in order for me to make progress. If I just try to burn the wick at both ends, I'm going to burn out. I'm going to have a mental health
Oh yeah.
breakdown. Ooh, woo, exactly. So at this point, I've
Ooh woo, just a little mentee bee, a little mental breakdown. Ooh woo. Just gonna do some cute little bed rotting for like 3 months. Ooh woo.
so that's why I dropped down to part-time. Finally said, you know what?
Mm.
Trying to push this through full-time just leads to burnout, which leads to me having to take a break, which in the end leads to me taking even more time to do it. So why not just say, I'm doing this part-time? Since I've done that, my mental health has been so much better. Giving myself that permission.
And I think that's also applicable when it comes to like, I wonder how many people think like, well, I'm already 40, I'm already 50, and I've lived my life this long. There's no sense in me changing it up and like being authentic. Like, I wonder how many people are just like, I'm already this old. Even if I've just now realized that I'm Ace, I'm just not going to do anything about it. Like, I still think no matter how old you are, even if you've lived like most of your life inauthentically, I still think that it's worth pursuing. Even if it took you 50 years to realize who you were, I still think it's worth living a way that makes you happy for the next like 5 to 10 to however long you got.
Absolutely. And a big reason why it took me so long to come out as non-binary is when I first started to put together, say, 5 or 6 years ago. I was like, no, that can't be me. I've, existed as somebody pretending to be cis for this long. How dare I not be? And, I just was really hesitant or resistant to the fact that I possibly could figure this out, in my 30s. And that's why I think it took me so long. I was like, no, that can't be me. Because I was told that, you have to figure this out when you're 3 or you're fake or something. It's
Yeah,
unfortunately.
a lot of things people are like, well, you would have known if you were a kid, so you're just trying to be special, you're trying to be different. And it's like, we really, like, the more niche the sexuality, the more of an uphill battle it is just to even know what it is, let alone to associate that with yourself.
Absolutely. And how many non-binary, folks did I know when I was growing up? This many. Zero.
Yeah, I don't think I knew any. Maybe one, but like I wasn't close with them. And I had a pretty queer surrounding. Like I had a lot of queer, like my unfortunately, my a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my resources when it comes to almost anything queer, is an amalgamation of like public forums or like video diaries, like Tumblr and YouTube were primarily what I kind of grew up on. Um, and it was a lot of people like they would do, video diaries or they'd vlog about, oh, just got top surgery and they'd vlog it. It's not exactly that, but so it was a lot of me just like absorbing other people's perspectives. And unfortunately, I did fall into a bit of the Calvin Guerra nonsense of like trans medicalism. And I think that there are a lot of people also in the queer community who kind of, with their like niche and not niche, but like reductive and narrow-minded views, they'll speak for the queer community, but ultimately end up doing harm to it, whether it's for gender or whether it's for sexuality, where like a lot of people in their activism might have a very love and sex focused um viewpoint on things where it's like everybody wants love, everybody just wants someone to hold at night, and it's like I mean they don't, but like I love you're making progress and I love that for you. Or I'm sure I haven't seen them blessedly, but like I'm sure there are people similarly to how they'll bitch about trans people, there might be people making scathing video essays about how asexuals and aromantics are weird or fakers or they just want attention and that they're not a real sexuality, because there's got to be just a slew of infighting for people to be angry at something.
Well, I mean, we already know what happened in April. A certain author, you know what I'm talking about, right? With a certain author
No.
that you didn't see a certain author of a children's book that
What,
we
the
don't
wizard
talk about,
lady?
the Wizard Lady, was absolutely angry as all hell that how dare asexuals have a visibility day? They are just looking for attention. You didn't see that?
Oh, no, I didn't. And my life was better before that. Why
Yeah,
is she insufferable? Oh,
I
that
know.
sucks.
It's disgusting, but it really does,
And it's people like that that's going to have a ripple effect where anyone who's delusional enough to admire her is going to be like, oh, yeah, that's just a fake. Because, like, there's already, I know some people who think that the A in the acronym is for ally. And so that further, like, erasure of, like, yeah, they're just fake and the A is for ally because J.K. Rowling told me so. And she has exactly one queer character who she only clarified was queer after the book because she wanted brownie points. And that means she's very trustworthy and speaks for the whole queer community. Fucking nonsense ass. Yeah, so we also get shit like that where a bunch of people with a lot of power and not a lot of sense can convince swaths of people to believe something. Because if people have never even seen the word asexual, but they know Wizard Lady, and then Wizard Lady says that this is fake, then they'll go, well, I've never heard of this before. Wizard Lady must be correct.
it did have the effect that this asexual, you know, International Asexuality Day was probably the most publicized of any International Asexuality Day that has ever existed because of Wizard Lady, as Pseudo Suga mentioned. The fact that that post went up and it went viral on Twitter actually did more to make asexuality visible than it would otherwise have been. So while it was
That's wild.
absolutely scathing and disgusting to see that, it did have the unintended effect from her perspective that it actually made it more visible to everyone. So,
Yeah.
despite your best efforts, Wizard Lazy, you actually made it more visible to everyone.
Yeah. Also, there's like, it's so weird to be uppity about that. There's 50 million holidays from things like potatoes and sandals.
Right?
So like, why are you being like, how dare this sexuality have a day? There's a day for cheese, lady.
There's a
Like,
day
chill
for
out.
donuts. There's a day for ice
Yeah.
cream.
Acting like it's a personal slight. It's like people just want to celebrate shit. Mind your business.
It has nothing to do with you. Why do you fucking care so much?
Yeah, honestly. Like, it's not your holiday. It's not your day. Mind your business, but she can't. She's incapable of it. She desperately needs to stay relevant because nobody wants her grimy wizard story anymore.
So true. So we are coming up to another ad break here.
Mm-hmm.
Should we take a short break again and then come back and chat about what do you want to chat about after the break?
Let's see, what haven't we touched on?
Talked
I
a lot
would
about,
like to
yeah.
touch. Mhm,
I was saying we have kind of talked around a lot of allonormativity and amatonormativity
mhm, mhm.
already, though we haven't used those terms necessarily.
Yeah,
What would
I
you like
think
to?
I have a couple of things as far as like what resources were helpful. Um, and I think bup, bup, bup. I think it's just like a couple of points on like the little list that you gave that I don't think we fully touched on that maybe we just pop around.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds good. So we'll take a short break here. I do like to take a break every hour just as a screen break as well for the screen sensitivity. So
Yeah, that's a good idea.
we'll see ya on the other side of the break.
See you after the ads.
Welcome back, folks. Thanks again
Welcome
for
back. Hello.
sticking through the ad break again. Gives me a chance to take a screen break. Always like to be mindful of that, especially given the screen sensitivity. Hence the purple glasses, as I've mentioned many times. So it's a nice reminder. Oh yeah, it's probably a good time to take a screen break.
Hmm.
So you wanted to talk a little bit about
So there's just a couple of points I wanted to make um about representation being a bit sparse. A little bit about my lived experience. Like how my lived experience influenced relationships and what I learned from being in relationships. And then and then good old pride in generals. I also do want to apologize, especially for going on tangents near the beginning there. Weirdly, I've doubled my ADHD medication and I feel more scatterbrained than ever. So I hope anything of what I'm saying is coherent.
I think so. I tend to go on
Okay, good.
tangents as well, as we've seen on the podcast.
um, but I think poisonally, um, as far as like rep that like we don't get a lot of rep in main media, but there is blessedly like I don't know. I used to be more of a buzzkill about like, oh, you can't make a character not their canon behavior, not their canon shape. But like I've chilled out a lot, and I think it is really cool when like because there's such a drought of representation, people can grab their favorite character from a show and be like, all right, this character is trans and asexual now. This is my little guy. I'm going to put him in a little shirt and he's going to hang out and I'm going to explore my sexuality through him. Or like because I when I was trying to think of like what character do you have in mind as a good representation of being aspec, I couldn't really think of any canonical ones. And all I can like wish for is that I wish I would see more like more aspects that are goofy, but not in like the doofy sidekick way. Because like most of the aspects I feel like are like aliens and robots.
And
And so I
Jughead.
kind of wish there was more. Yeah. But I wish I was seeing more that are like, I don't know, just like build a regular character and then just make them asexual as like a fun side thing.
Yeah.
And I think that would be fun. Or like I want to be able to see more like polyamory or alternative relationship dynamics that aren't tragic. Because like at least recently, I saw this post describing and like I could see where the appeal is, but it hit something in me I didn't like where one side of the relationship is like in puppy dog love, and the other one is either not interested in them all or is aspec in some regard, so they're not attracted to them. And it's the whole dynamic is this bittersweet tragedy where the person who is in love with them loves them so much that they're willing to sacrifice and be just friends forever. And like I get the appeal of like the tragedy in that of like pining and unrepining like unreciprocated love. But there's also a part of me that's like I hate that. Because this idea of how tragic it is that you're in love with someone who doesn't feel that way about you. And it's like, I don't want people to think that about me. I think it's fine if we had more positive depictions of aspec relationships, but because we don't, it's sort of like all right, so either I'm emotionally stunted or I'm hurting normal people because I don't want to fuck them. And that sucks.
And you mentioned about, the really fucked up representations of polyamory in media. There's a large overlap
Yeah.
between, folks in the aspec community and folks that, may relate to relationship anarchy or, be poly.
Hmm.
The
Well, because I
poly
think that's such a.
representation is horrible. It's absolutely horrid
Oh,
and
yeah.
usually, represented in a horribly negative light.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it would be so much nicer, especially like, I don't know, just because you don't want sex doesn't mean you don't want companionship. Or just because you don't want to kiss someone doesn't mean you don't want to live with someone. And so like there's all of these little niches where like sometimes it you can get all your needs met, it just takes a few more people,
Hmm.
and you can find, you know, where it's like, yeah, I want a life partner. I really vibe with this the way, this person doesn't snore really loud or kick when they sleep. We both like the same firmness of mattress. We're both considerate and do our dishes. And, you know, also we're really good cuddlers, but we don't want to kiss and we don't want to bang. And so like all of these compatibilities for someone to be a life partner. And then if you want other aspects, you can seek them out and find relationships with other people, but have like a nice structured like network.
Absolutely. You know, why can't we have the QPR representation?
Yeah, it's always like really toxic, or it's like it's a cheating plot, or it's like, oh, we didn't depictions of just like a healthy, successful poly relationship. It's either used for drama or it's used to be messy. And like it can be messy. It's hard enough to communicate with one person, let alone more than one. But I think that polyamory is a great relationship style for not for everyone, but for a lot of people.
And I think,
Maybe
for many folks who are, Ace or Aro spec, there can be a lot of value to it, in this idea that you don't have to be stuck with just the one life partner. You've got this,
yeah,
you're able to have, you know, multiple folks that can meet the different needs that you might have.
yeah. Like, and it sometimes isn't. I don't know. Like maybe you really like hiking and you find hiking really wonderful and romantic, but you're with someone who either can't hike or doesn't like hiking. And so you can have someone to go on a romantic hike date with. Like, I don't know. There's just so many different facets of a person's life that is very rarely entirely satisfied by one other person. And it would be nice if it was more chill that A, you could get your needs met in certain ways from other people without this fear of like, I'm going to be abandoned or they're going to leave me for this person. But also, I think it would be nice for just like oh God, ADHD is making me lose it. I had a point regarding, no, my brain, it's left. The colander is empty. There was a segue to this that I've lost, unfortunately.
I have been there far too many times. It's perfectly okay.
But like, I do think, I don't know, especially in like my experience with relationships. Um, right from like one of the reasons that I figured out that I was even Aro Ace was like I chose crushes as a kid. I would just be like, all right, here's the criteria that I think would make a good crush, and I am picking this guy. And it was usually either they were in proximity to me, they liked me, like just generally because I got bullied a lot and I was the weird autistic kid, so people liking me, it was not many. Or like when I was older and I had kind of gotten the brainworms of like kind of toxic beauty standards. I was like the tallest in my grade. And so it was like, all right, I need to pick a guy and he has to be taller than me and we have to have sort of similar hobbies. And that was and I picked the one guy who met all three and then I pretended to write a love note to him, left it in the classroom for a sense of drama, regretted it, went back, and I don't remember if I found it or lost it. But it was all this like this fun game of pretend almost. Like I wanted a crush, it just wasn't authentic. I was just trying to coax one. Um, or like when I was younger, like really, really young, I had like a childhood friend who was like in love with me. And I initially didn't really reciprocate. And then eventually, because he was just so like, it just kept coming up. There was a party that was either like, I wanted to give him what he wanted. I was also curious about it. So I would like kiss him or like lead him on, but not like because I was just kind of like, it's nice to be valued. It's nice to be loved. Or it's like, I want to try this thing I've never tried before. Without like fully understanding like what they wanted from me. Um, but like since then, I've learned like I don't know that you can be valued and you can be loved outside of someone wanting to kiss you or someone wanting to date you. It's especially prevalent when you're raised a girl because like every single choice you make, every single step you take, uh, is about whether or not strangers think you're attractive. And that is so intertwined in your value as a human being to the point where you're not allowed to walk down the street without a smile on your face. Or if you dare the aghast of someone seeing your bra strap. Or I was told a lot as a kid to suck my stomach in so that I looked like it wasn't the cognitive, like, oh, that man over there needs to think you're hot, suck your stomach in. But it was like this weird, I'm in my own house and I'm being told to suck my stomach in so that I look more presentable. Like it's just this super prevalent, ceaseless expectation that you have to posture yourself for someone else's attraction that just really taints everything.
Yep. Really fucked up.
Hmm. And like one of my first like real relationships, um, like we were like officially like dating. It wasn't like or like we called ourselves like partners as opposed to just like oh it's a situationship or you know we're dating. It was like we were partners. Um, I got cheated on within like 3 months. I don't care now and I didn't care then. Um, it was very dramatic for them. They went to a party, and they got drunk and they hooked up with someone, and everyone knew, and then they had to tell me, otherwise someone else would tell me. And it was this dramatic, like inviting me to McDonald's and sitting me down and telling me at the table. Um, and I did not care. I didn't have a single emotion. I was just like, oh, okay. Well, thanks for telling me. So we're gonna keep dating, right? Like I straight up was like, I don't mind. Like we can work through this. That's because like I also recognized that they were like doing some self-sabotaging shit of like they would basically find a way to break up every 3 months with whoever they were dating. I don't know why, but I recognized that. So I'm like, okay, my brain was focused on, okay, how do we fix this? How do we help guide you through this emotional turmoil? I did not give a fuck that I got cheated on. But they were like, oh, I feel so guilty. I can't, we have to, like, they insisted we break up, even though I was like, no, I'm fine. We're chill. Because they just felt so guilty about it. And I was so indifferent.
Yeah,
um, which for other people would be different, I'm sure. They would have a sense of
absolutely.
betrayal, but I was like, I didn't feel any sort of like demand for exclusivity
Hmm.
with this person. I was like, it's only been 3 months. Why would I be upset?
Yeah,
But like
very.
other people feel differently.
Especially when we're so
Um,
trained from the time that we're young that monogamy is the only option.
yeah. I mean, that is like that's the standard that we see, right? Like not a lot of people are born into the world with more than two parents. Some people are, but not most people aren't. And so and I feel like a lot of kids, they don't learn from being told what to do. They learn from copying and seeing, like actions being louder than words. And so it's like, unless you are taught, like, hey, there's so many different ways that you can be and so many relationships you can have, you're going to be like, all right, I need to do what my parents are doing. And that's what I got to copy. And everyone everywhere is telling me that's also what I have to do. So that's like a cemented foundational belief. Even if it doesn't feel right, that's just what you got to do.
Yeah. And polyamory is so often inflated with polygamy, and
Hmm.
it's really problematic because the moment you mention polyamory, they're like, "Ooh, that's disgusting. Isn't that polygamy?" I'm like, not if
Yeah.
it's ethical non-monogamy, but that just
Y-
doesn't cross anybody's head unless
Yeah.
you've
It's not like a
actually thought
section
about
of
it.
control where it's like one person has a harem. It's like, it just means you're not locked in with only one person.
That's not going to work for everyone. I'm not trying to say it
Yeah.
is. I just want to make the argument that there are other relationship styles that can work for folks. And
Yeah.
for many folks in ASPEC communities, relationship anarchy, which is not the same as polyamory, though there's an overlap,
Hmm.
polyamory can be a very valid relationship style. And I
Hmm.
know several fairly large creators. Astat Advice, aka Cody Diagonal Orions, is in a poly relationship, and for them, it works well because their partner, one of their I guess primary partner, is allosexual, and for Cody, obviously, in their case, sex is not a big part of their life. And so for them, it works well because their primary partner's got somebody else to fulfill, the sexual desires. And, Cody's there for other reasons, and it works out really well. And I know several folks who are ace that have sort of that similar structure, and it works for them. Doesn't work for everyone, obviously, but for them, it does.
Yeah. I think like about how for the bulk of it for my life, like I have a very low libido generally. But things change in life, like going on testosterone, which can increase your desire to be intimate. And so, like, you could be like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like both romantic and sexual desire is kind of like someone outside my window that just kind of like knocks on the window and goes like, hey, you want to buy a watch? And I'm like I could, but like I'd have to go outside. I'd have to put my shoes on, like, and I'm in my bed and I'm comfy. And so it's just
Mood.
sort of like occasionally a little knock, knock, knock on the window, like, hey, you want some? And it's like, like, eh. And I feel like for some people, a good relationship for them is like twice a year. They go, they get it on, they get it out of their system, they have a wonderful time, and then the rest of the year, they're just unbothered. Some people, that's all they want. They want it twice a year, and then they're done, and they're chill about it. And not many monogamous relationships are gonna foster that.
No,
Some might,
absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely. I
but
don't
yeah,
know where that
not a lot of
command. Oh, there
people.
it is. I was trying to find the command for Hugster Duke. Hugster Duke got it. I
Oh, you're trying to find the sex favorability?
Yeah, Hugster Duke got it. I didn't see that it actually got the Nightbot command. I was like, do I have to spell it the Canadian way? But no, I did spell it. I did create it so that it was the US spelling. So I tricked myself apparently. Oh, you're very right on that. And in the relationship I was in, it was mostly like, all right, let's do this because you want to. It was like, I'm not really wanting this, but all right, let's do it because I know that this is what you want. So I can totally understand that aspect for sure. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. You still there? Oh, did we lose Caber? Welcome back. Yeah. Heck yeah.
Sorry about that.
No
My
worries.
sound quality might be different. I'm on my phone now.
Oh
Apologies.
yeah, I can hear that now. All good. Did we chat did
I
we
didn't want to
chat
leave you
about
hanging too long.
finish off by talking about what does Ace and Arrow Pride mean?
Um, bup, 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 bup. Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah.
Sure. So, what does Arrow Ace Pride mean to you?
Personally, I feel like it is about having like contentment with yourself, but also like loving other people, but not needing them to be like not needing the validation or not needing other people to be a person, to be valid as a human, as well as like for me it's been about learning to have a sense of intuition for my emotions and for my body of like not just doing something because I think I'm supposed to, but because I genuinely feel it, because I genuinely enjoy it. Um, which there's a lot of crossover because some of that is a very autistic experience, but I also think I feel it a lot. The people pleasing bleeds into like being asexual and aromantic, where a lot of my relationships were, I didn't have the same drive they did, but I had an immense amount of satisfaction from making someone else happy, from satisfying someone else. And that did unfortunately lead to me doing a few things that I didn't necessarily want to do. Um, but I wasn't like fully aware of that at the time. And I think having pride is also just un like I don't know, sticking by your feelings and honoring them and not buckling for anyone else. Like there's always a temptation of like if someone most of the relationships I've been in were because somebody hit on me. That's normally how I don't reach out to people. I'm very much a content like I mean it'd be nice if it happened. Like it's the thing with the window, right? It'd be like it'd be nice if it happened, but I'm not gonna chase it because I'm comfy in bed. Most of my relationships I've been in have been because someone has approached me, and to some degree there is a part of it that is, oh, someone's into me, so now I need to be into them.
I can relate. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. So like I think having pride is learning not only to be content with yourself, but also to honor yourself and the honesty of your emotions and not try to force yourself to feel a way that just because it's normal or because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, you know? That, like I said earlier, where like a nice guy asks you out and you get treated like a bitch just because you won't give him a chance. But it's like you need to honor the honest truth about your feelings. If you don't feel anything, you shouldn't try to force yourself to because, like, oh, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to break his heart. It's like you don't feel anything. That's not going to change. And you need to be honest with yourself and not try to force yourself because it's also a disservice to the other person to pursue something disingenuously.
Absolutely. So true. I really like that answer. We've had, a really good array of discussions, what Ace and Aro Pride looks like. And there is no one answer.
That's,
That's what's so beautiful about this. I think we lost you,
no,
fortunately.
I'm still here.
Oh,
My headphones blipped.
oops.
Every tech is having every issue right now. My headphones just turned off and back on again. I didn't want you to have to hear loud background noise,
Well, I appreciate
so
that.
I muted for a
Thanks.
sec. Because my mic is also in my headphones for my phone.
We might be
Um,
losing. I'm getting a bitrate issue on my stream now. Are we cutting out? Can
oh
you
shit,
check?
maybe there's a big outage.
Because I'm getting like bitrate of 624 right now.
I feel like the world is telling us
That it's time
they're
to,
being ace phobic.
yeah, time to cut out. Time to cut out. Time to fade to a raid, I guess.
So we got to the end. That's what matters.
We
We got to the
did.
last questions.